What's next for transportation energy? On today's episode, a conversation with John Eichberger, Transportation Energy Institute's Executive Director, and Lane Howard, Director of Biofuels at the National Corn Growers Association, about the role of corn growing and ethanol production in developing cleaner liquid fuel blends and reducing carbon emissions.
Hey, Lane, thanks for joining us today. Can you kind of give us a little background on what National Corn Growers Association is? What are you guys working on, your priorities right now as you go into 2025?
Yeah, National Corn Growers Association's a membership-based organization with about 36,000 members across 48 states. We also represent all 300,000 corn farmers across the country, and a lot of our work is done as a federation in partnership with our 27 state affiliates. For 2025 and really beyond, our main priorities are to increase corn grind through all markets possible, as well as driving profitability at the farm level. So some key things that we work on, especially right now, we're working on E15 year-round solution. We're working to make sure that corn and ethanol have a part to play in programs like 45Z, and we're very interested in all of the tax policy as well as the Farm Bill.
So you guys have been association partners with Transportation Energy Institute for a very long time. You've sponsored the event sponsorship for our annual conference several years in a row. Can you share a little bit of what brought you guys to TEI as a member and why you guys have been so engaged recently?
Yeah, from our standpoint, as well as all of our affiliate standpoint, the best way to grow the corn market right now is through on-road use through ethanol. And so for us to really be able to engage in those conversations, we needed to be where the conversations were at with all the stakeholders. So throughout the entire value chain of liquid fuels. So from our standpoint, corn and ethanol, but also some oil interest as well as any auto engagement as well. So Transportation Energy Institute, which I think we started actually whenever it was fuels. I think whenever we first really partnered was actually at the transition, I think. So it was kind of nice to be there through that process, just to see the organization evolve. So our engagement with Transportation Energy Institute has been predominantly to be able to engage in those conversations, but also have an opportunity and a platform for everyone to have those conversations. So not just from our standpoint, but to be able to engage with the entire network and let everyone else engage as well.
I think it's critical for our perspective to understand the farmer's perspective. So, TEI, we're looking at how do you reduce carbon emissions? How do you reduce criteria pollutant emissions? How do you do it in a way that's affordable and economically sustainable? And to have that conversation, to understand where we are in terms of low carbon fuel options. We have electrification, that's one side, but 95%, 97% of the vehicles in operation still run on liquid fuel. If we really want to reduce emissions, we got to address the fuel blend. Where do you guys see right now the role of ethanol? We have the renewable fuel standard, you have the low carbon fuel standard in a few states. We see a shift in policy in Washington with regards to climate mitigation and those things. Are your members still pretty bullish on the future of ethanol and its role in reducing emissions across the board?
Absolutely. I think that we see opportunity, especially in the near term with any type of E15 solution. We think that allowing E15 to be in the marketplace will lead to retailers putting it in the marketplace. And so then it becomes a low cost option for consumers. And then, if we look at it throughout the entire network of liquid fuels, I think that, widespread adoption would help lower the carbon intensity of our fuel. And I think that one thing that isn't always recognized and is starting to be recognized, right? We saw it with the 45Z GRE, is the recognition of on-farm practices. So we've got growers that have been doing this stuff for years, right? So they may not be able to take advantage of some voluntary markets because it's not a practice change, but some of our membership have widespread adoption of things like cover crops or no-till. It just may not have been recognized in prior iterations of rules, but they're there to make sure that they're taking advantage of opportunity that allows them to be a part of this process. And so, what we continue to encourage people is to, have the framework in place, allow farmers to innovate, and then participate in the market. So I think, we see ourselves as a low cost octane source as well. if there are folks interested in octane, that we can fit those markets as well, and be able to participate in that way, if the opportunity allows itself.
I think the key, we just published a paper on, what's a life cycle assessment look like? And you talk about on-farm practices to reduce the carbon intensity of the production is critical. So we added a farmer from Iowa to our board last year, and a lot of people say, why is a farmer on a transportation energy board? But he's come on to help us understand. We have a group on sustainable agricultural practices. Why are we doing that? Because if you look at the life cycle approach and recognize if we reduce carbon anywhere in the supply chain, it's a positive thing. If we produce a lower emitting fuel product anywhere in the supply chain, is a good thing. And understanding what we can do to have lower carbon corn, lower carbon soybeans and canola beans coming into the fuel supply, we are adding to the ability to have a low carbon fuel for all vehicles. And again, if we have, say, an E15 blend with sustainable agricultural practices growing the corn, going through an ethanol biorefiner, which is using some renewable energy resources, reducing their carbon emissions, you are dramatically reducing the emissions out of the tailpipe. And you haven't done anything to the car. You're just changing the fuel and not asking the customer to do anything different, which from my perspective is a huge win if we can get those products to market appropriately.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's interesting to see how this whole conversation's evolved, right? You've been at it from the beginning where you've advocated for an all of the above approach, and just highlighting the fact that, like you said, there are no changes needed, right? EPA has approved all 2001 and newer vehicles for E15. There's E15 in the marketplace with no problems happening, with your vehicles, and so it's a common sense solution. It's just a matter of getting some of the regulation out of the way to allow it. But it's here. The framework's here. The network's here. All the infrastructure's set up. Most of the infrastructure's set up right across the country.
Right.
So you're not trying to install chargers at places. You're not looking to have people find places to stop or adjust their routines. It's something that can drop into a customer's routine, just the same way it's been. And so we've been advocating for this for a while, both on the policy and the market development side, just to make sure that the common sense solution is there, but also on our side to help drive demand for corn and corn-based ethanol.
It's funny how time changes. So when the E15 waiver was first approved, I think it was 2011 for 2001 and newer vehicles. 2001 wasn't that far in the past. And I remember I was on the lobby side at the time going, well, wait, but what about this? And what about that? What if this happens? What if that happens? And I remember the ethanol industry saying, well, John, no, those things aren't going to happen. But what if they do? And now it's 2025. Vehicles that are approved are 24 years old. So the vast majority of vehicles are now 2001 and newer, except for, some of the really older vehicles, which is a very small percentage of the population. And in the 14 years, we've not had any high profile problems. I put E15 in my vehicles. We're still at fewer than 5,000 stations. I think it really is that year-round regulatory structure. If we can get that fixed, I see retailers across the board saying, yeah, you know what? I can offer my customers a higher octane, a lower price. I can get the RINs. I can get some carbon credits if I'm blending and participating in the voluntary carbon market. There's economic value for retailers to bring it to market once the regulatory red tape is eliminated. Now that we're 14 years past the waiver dates, like all the, trouble scenarios that I was asking about, not creating, not inventing, well, maybe some of them we were, but we were asking about to see, what if they're not materializing. And so I really think there's a great opportunity here that once we get this really arbitrary restriction lifted, that we have an opportunity to really bring more low carbon fuels to market in a way that is economically beneficial for consumers, for retailers, and for the farmers. And I think that's a great thing across the board.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like you said earlier, 97% of the vehicles on the road are able to use E15. I think you're right. If we remove the burdensome regulation, then we have an opportunity to get it in the supply areas, right? And then retailers will take it up. We're seeing a lot of states adopt policies that support retailers going to higher blends. Whether that's E15 or above. We've seen the federal government and quite a few states invest in grant programs that allow retailers to make these investments and upgrades. We saw some hesitation, right? In some of my prior work, direct work with retailers, it was, well, what are we going to do if it's not there, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just if I can sell it, it's what if I can't buy it, right? So
Right.
I think, like we highlighted, that as long as the regulation's out of the way, I think that the supply will be there, and then therefore it'll be available to consumers. And it is, it is an easy way to reduce emissions, but it's an even easier way to save money for consumers.
Let me pick up on that topic about supply, because you mentioned that NCGA views the on-road transportation market as the growth potential for ethanol. Yet there's a lot of concern about sustainable aviation fuel taking feedstock out of the on-road market because, quite frankly, people are not nearly as price sensitive about jet fuel as they are about the gasoline they buy for their vehicle. Do you guys see SAF really being a huge boon for the ethanol industry, or is that more of a distraction?
I think it could be a boon. Yeah, I think that there are a lot of things that have to happen before it's there. So when we look at on-road, we're looking near term, things that we can do today to affect corn grind and farm profitability. When we look long term, we are looking at SAF and a few other things, but SAF potentially could be a huge opportunity for all feedstocks, right? Corn, soybean, biomass, any type of biomass, right? So is it a distraction? I don't think so. Is it a long-term play? Yeah. I mean, we've got to look at the investment that these companies have to make to be able to produce SAF. And you highlighted the cost difference as well. So we need to get things in DC right, to make sure that there are opportunities for these people to make the investment to be able to produce an economical fuel, and be able to scale it up as well, right? So we're not seeing the scale up that was originally expected whenever the people started talking about SAF 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a little slower, and that part of that's been the incentive part of it. They needed, new industries need some help, right? Some incentives to help make sure that they can scale. And so I think we're seeing some issues related to that, and some delays in rulemaking haven't really helped that either.
Yeah, so I'm quite a bit older than you. I've been in this industry now for 25 years. And I'll tell you, everything moves slower than they think it will. Nothing moves as fast as they think it will.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I think, you mentioned DC, and I think you're right. The policies have to line up. But one of the things that I'm excited about with the biofuels market is the economics on their own create an incentive to bring them to market. It incentivizes the consumers to buy them, the retailers to sell them. And I think, long term, that's what we really need, is that economic independent sustainability. The other thing is we published a paper last year, 2024, looking at the economic impacts of biofuel production. Because we had a couple of board members, we're still hearing this debate, food or fuel. Why are we taking food and converting it to fuel? And so we wanted to objectively see, is the production of biofuels having a negative implication on our food supply or food prices? And the result is absolutely not. We see no correlation between the use of biofuels, because we're definitely using a different grain to get into the fuel market than we are for the food market. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, less than 1% of corn grown in the U.S. is actually sweet corn that goes into the food market. And it's really worth highlighting that the ethanol industry has done a lot of work to be able to really hone in the process, right? And through that process, not only do we gain ethanol, right, through the bushel of corn, but we also gain several pounds of dried distillers grains, right? So they can sell that as wet distillers grains. That has a shorter shelf life, or dried distillers grains, which has a pretty good shelf life, and that is high protein animal feed. So we're not taking the feed away from livestock, but we're really providing both the fuel on our side and then a high protein product on the back end that then goes to the livestock industry. So those really help. And as far as the economic value of biofuels, I mean, it makes it easy. It's an easy selling point, right? Whenever you're in a room with a retailer and you're saying, hey, we're looking to try to target a new market, and they ask, how it works in their business plan. You lay the details out for them and show them some actual real market examples, and they see the value that it can create. And so not only does it really affect the price at the pump, but it helps extend the entire supply of liquid fuels in the country. And so what that does is then helps actually spread out the cost a little bit. So we're looking at an even more economical value to the consumer.
Yeah, you mentioned distillers grains and livestock feed. I'm trying to remember the number, but in that paper we published, we actually looked and saw that if the RFS did not exist and we were not producing ethanol, I think we'd have to put into production another 15 million acres to generate enough feed to replace the distilled grains that we would be getting as a byproduct. And it's just, you think about it, 15 million acres. I can't conceptualize what 15 million is. I used to live on 12 acres. Think about 15 million is beyond my ability to comprehend, but it's a big chunk of land that we don't have to grow in order to feed the livestock we're feeding. And that's something people just don't get. They don't understand the relationship between the biofuel industry and the food industry. That's a positive one.
Yeah, and if you look at the charts from the last 40 years, right? There's a chart that highlights planted acres versus production. So planted acres of corn have stayed relatively flat. And there have been a lot of reasons that have led to that, but planted acres of corn have stayed relatively flat. But we've seen kind of, I wouldn't call it a hockey stick, but a pretty substantial growth in the amount of corn that we produce. So when we talk sustainability, we always talk doing more with less, and that's a huge highlight. Is we're doing a lot more on less land, and it's really hard to get people to understand that because, like you said, people don't always see it, and nor can we conceptualize what 15 million acres is. But it's just one of those ways that we innovate. That's been through precision ag, genetics, right? Seed genetics have been huge in that. Precision ag's been a major player, but just agronomics, right? Understanding corn and the corn plant, how we get it to grow.
Right. I was just while we're talking, I went ahead and Googled, well, how big is 15 million acres? And it says 15 million acres looks like a Rhode Island almost. So
Okay.
Rhode Island is 776,000 acres. So it is what, 30 times the size of Rhode Island? That's ridiculous. Now, Rhode Island is not big, but still, you put it in context like that, that's a huge chunk of land.
Yeah, and you think about the fact that we're actually growing things. I mean, I've already highlighted the less land, but there are so many reasons, right? Like people are moving out of cities are getting bigger. I mean, those types of things play in here, and we're pretty much moving out of productive farmland at that point. So is it really 15 million, or is it actually a little bit more? Is that 15 million of the most productive farm acres, or 15 million of marginal ground too? I mean, it's hard to really nail that down, but just kind of some thought there.
Yeah. So, thanks, Lane. Anything that you want to share about corn growers that we haven't talked about yet today?
We talked about practices and not as much about sustainability, but I think it's worth highlighting that just like any smart business owner, all of our growers really look at what the next generation can do. And so it would be unfair not to highlight the sustainable approach that all of our growers take to production and really trying to prepare for the next generation and make sure that they're taking care of the land, being good stewards, and making sure that they can pass that on.
That raises another observation of mine. We keep hearing how certain stakeholders want renewable fuels, they want lower carbon fuels, but they don't like row crop agriculture because of the use of pesticides and herbicides and all that stuff. And what you just said is so important. Farmers have to take care of their land because that is their lifeblood. Under what circumstances do we think farmers are going to poison the land to boost yields and sacrifice the future? We have to recognize that your members, that land is their children. They're going to take care of it every step they can. And so the efforts on lower use of pesticides and all that stuff to really take care of the land is something that, you're right, needs to be highlighted because it's something not getting enough credit for.
That's right. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah. So, all right, Lane, thanks, man. Appreciate it. I'll see you in San Antonio at TEI 25.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks, man. Talk to you soon.
What's Next for Transportation Energy is a production of the Transportation Energy Institute. Find out more about us at transportationenergy.org.